Sergeant Christopher with the Maine State Police.
Oh, how's it going?
Good. You left us a message, and I just wanted to follow up to see if there was something that I could, if there was a service I could provide for you,
Uh,
or what I could do to help you.
what was the message exactly?
Well, it was a long message about the Constitution and laws.
Okay. And was it about? I had kind of gone on a situation of where I have a huge respect for the law. I talked to one. His name was Deputy Forbes. I also talked to another officer. His name was Andrew. I forget his last name, but I believe he was a lieutenant. and you know, basically having a large respect for the law and going through my own experiences of life. I was going to be a law enforcement officer, but I started to see like I started to envision of what it would be like to be around the worst of humanity all the time. And then to have faith in humanity or believe in goodness of humanity started to become kind of deterred from that perception. And so I was like, well, maybe I could be a game warden. And then I found out you needed 5 years of a officer experience, whether it was a patrolman or a deputy or sheriff. You needed to have experience either way as a law enforcement officer before you could become a game warden. So my teacher in college was actually an IA officer, and she was an internal agent, affairs agent, and she disclosed to me right away that, basically there needs to be police for police because sometimes police don't respect people's rights or at least the Constitution. And I became very confused, but in the process of me going to school, one of my friends at that time, he hung himself. It was 2014, 2013, right around there. And that kind of emotionally deterred me. I then started to work for a storm chasing company, which allowed me to work next to insurance companies and helping homeowners. And that started to increase my knowledge of the law. And then I got accused of public adjuster fraud and insurance fraud. I actually beat the case after 2 years. That then opened up a doorway for me to study kind of how there's a light side of the law and kind of a dark side of the law. And it really expanded my level of awareness of the Constitution, rights, and all these things. And in that process, I have always had a respect for law enforcement and then wondered, like, what about our rights and all those particular things? And I noticed that, and there's no disrespect, it's just a regular conversation. I noticed that a lot of officers, while they swore an oath to protect and serve the Constitution, which is supposed to be a part of their job description, I had then had a question, well, which Constitution was it? Was it the Constitution of Maine of 1820? Was it the United States Constitution of the continental United States of Washington, District of Columbia? Or was it the legislative's Constitution? And I asked that to Lieutenant Andrew, and he said that's a really good question. And really, the reason why I believe I was calling was to see the job description of a police officer, because usually when a citizen or civilian or anybody starts to exercise their rights, whether the police officer was put in the spot or not, um, his excuse is always, well, I'm just doing my job. So that kind of stemmed a very deep curiosity when I noticed through many videos on, it doesn't matter whether it was the Real News Network and auditors or anything. And again, there's good cops, there's bad cops. There's good citizens, there's bad citizens. I'm not going to try to judge the whole entire egg basket based off one person's conduct, but when you start to see a repetitive behavior of these kind of things, it starts to make you question really what is a police officer's job description. Me and Lieutenant Andrew sat down for quite a while discussing this very topic, and he said that he agrees with a lot of the things that I say, but let's say somebody, let's say, was a national, they don't have a United States ID or a state ID issued to them from the state. Then they got a different kind of ID, the right to travel. And we didn't get in an argument, but definitely an educating situation. And I even found inside Title 29A 109 where it talks about, the limitation of a vehicle may not be operated commercially at a site within this state or used for transportation of persons, merchandise, and materials, and talking about the definition between driving and how there is, as long as a vehicle, the exemptions under its the provisions and applicable to non-residents. And then Title 29A 109 goes into exemptions from registration of this subsection apply only to non-commercial or use and operation of vehicles in this state, which I've had discussions with other police officers before, and they still was going to rip somebody out of the vehicle even though they had stated that they were not operating at a for hire capacity or commercial activity. And then Lieutenant Andrew was like, okay, so let's say we agree with what you're saying. What if you're driving 20 over the speed limit in a residential area? All these complaints were made. You don't want to answer questions. You don't want to give your ID. How do we deal with this situation with you guys? And I felt like this was bridging a gap between the police and nationals and people who want to preserve their rights and recognize their authority under Section 2 of the Maine Constitution, where all power is inherent by the people, free governments are instituted by the people for their benefit and safety. And again, I respect law enforcement and I understand that they're out there still protecting people, rapists, drug dealers, murderers. There's a lot that police officers do. And then um, basically, he he said that he really agreed with a lot of the stuff that I was saying. He wanted me to contact legislation to try to figure out a way that we can work out some kind of statute or a bill that institutes the right to travel, of where a vehicle that is not operating at a commercial capacity does not have to have their Fourth Amendment right violated by an officer of the law because he sees a vehicle that might have a different license plate or chooses not to have a license plate because it's their private property, and then gets pulled over. And because he doesn't have a driver's license or a registration, which I've seen this happen, they will presume the authority to then open up the vehicle or threaten or intimidate the person that's going through the encounter. And how can we prevent this moving forward in all these situations? And so that's kind of was my situation. I had discovered in New Hampshire that there was a bill that was passed by legislation under HB 507 FN A local, which is the New Hampshire right to travel. And then it's recognized under capital letters RSA 382 8 A colon 9 109 of the UCC, recognizing non-commercial use and activities. So I had talked to him. I'm really grateful that you're returning my call. I wish that we could sit down more and have these kind of conversations to describe the job description of a police officer or law enforcement officer. I had questions: was does a police officer or a police department a for-profit organization, as in means of collecting revenue? And in fact, I found in um, 29A, it says the description of a law enforcement officer in there, and it had talked about, where did I find it? Um, so basically, that was the reason of calling, was figuring out the job description of a police officer. I'm trying to find inside you guys' code book of the legislation, which the actual definition of a police officer was. And because that was my question. And I know that a police officer, okay, well, I'll tell you what I've discovered so far. So you guys,
I think if you check like Title 22, I think it's Title 22. Don't quote me on that.
okay,
But in the Maine revised statutes, there are statutes in there that provide for like the authority of state police, provide information on what we are tasked with. It's kind of like what the legislature has empowered us to do, and you and like I said, I think it's Title 22. If you go to the website, Maine Revised Statutes, you'll be able to find it. Very smart, clearly.
thank you.
But you can look all that stuff up and see the statutes that govern our authority.
Right.
And I think that you were given very good advice as far as working with your representatives that are in Augusta or in the state that you live.
Yeah, I contacted David Woodson yesterday, and right now his term of office is being expired. So we have another election coming up, and as a state national, we are basically not a citizen of the state. We're a state citizen. So these it's really the language, you know, and I'm not sure if you're aware of like how America has two Americas and how there's actually basically the state of Maine, all capital letters, and then there's actually the Republic of Maine under the original, you know, how do we put it? In 1776, we declared our independence, obviously. And then as we began our charters of a constitution, is where we had the continental United States and the Articles of Confederation, and then I'm not, I'm going to check out Title 22. And in fact,
Yeah,
I recently,
and I don't have it right. You know, sorry, I didn't get your first name. I'm sorry.
okay, you can call me Seneca.
Seneca.
Yep.
Okay. And my first name's Chris. So listen.
Thank you, Chris.
When you go, you log into the website.
Yep.
Like I said, I'm not looking at it right. I'm just going off memory, but it's one of those titles. I want to say it's in the 20s. And you'll see, you'll find it. I mean,
this morning, right? I learned this thing that if you're getting so this is the power that you guys have, which I'm not trying to take away from you. In fact, you can't challenge the authority of a police officer given to the state. There was a Supreme Court case that in the 1800s, a police officer was illegally detaining and then arresting somebody. Another police officer stepped in, stopped that individual from arresting this person, which then there was a Supreme Court ruling that if a police officer is arresting you, then you have a right to resist. Well, that case law does not protect anybody anymore. So if you're trying to resist any form of arrest, whatever happens to you is on you. And so that's how much authority you guys have, that even if you're not aware, like I'll give you an example. In I think 15 or 2016 in La Junta, Colorado, there was an individual. What was his name? His name was so it was Donovan Duran, and it was Sergeant Vincent Fraker and Officer John McMillan. He was drunk. He was asking the officers to arrest him. They wouldn't. Then when they finally got a reason to arrest him, he was trying to not remove his handcuffs, but he was lifting up his ass off the seat, putting his handcuffs underneath him, and then trying to take it out. And then they grabbed him, threw him right on the ground, and instantaneously paralyzed. And then they were like, "Get up off the ground!" And then he couldn't, so they dragged him. And again, you know, I'm not saying that this is you, but it's like, was he innocent when he first got encountered? Because, you know, like there has to be a level of where, okay, if I'm a police officer and I'm noticing somebody with a threatening firearm, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect anybody, including myself, from this person. He's obviously a threat. He's dangerous. He's going to be taken down. That would be my natural instinct. It doesn't matter whether I was a police officer trying to follow rights, laws, or whatever. I notice a man with a firearm. He pulls it out. He's aiming it at wherever in the direction of the public and civilians. I'm going to act in all protocols and measures of my training to take this individual down. And then I'm pretty sure there's measures of all procedure that you guys have to take when filing these specific situations. So I don't question your legal authority of acting in violence when it's necessary. Like, it's when someone is trying to assess whether, like, let's say you pull me over and I'm like, "Listen, officer, I reserve all rights delegated by God and protected by the Constitution, recognized under UCC 1-308, which takes the Uniform Commercial Code and the Constitution and puts them right in harmony with each other." So then I say, "Did you swear an oath to protect and serve the Constitution?" And you say yes, and this actually turns you into a peace officer, a public servant. Now, again, it doesn't make you my slave or whatever. It makes you a peace officer. It makes you here to kind of regulate situations and not necessarily treat this as though it's a hostile situation. That's my presumption of what's going. So then I say,
I'm going to, because I have to get to a meeting. It's
okay.
Statute 25. It's in Maine Revised Statute 25.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And these are very, very high-end academic conversations.
I'd like to work with you some more on a different time of when you can set this aside and we can look, I know we don't hang out on Friday nights, and I'm going to tell you the truth. Like anybody I talk to, and I'm going to let them know, I have literally lived 38 years, and I can honestly say this is the most that I've ever had conversations interacting with law enforcement, anything that has actually helped me. So that means that I honestly can say through my entire existence, not once has police officers really benefited me out here in the normal world. And so when a police officer is encountering you in real life, they're not your friend. They're investigating. And this is really typically how most, I mean, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. It's pretty much the truth. You're doing your job. If you're talking to me, there's a reason. It's not like we're having a discussion like we are right now. And I would
Mm-hmm.
love to bridge a gap of where we can, off the record, without some kind of situation of where we're both incriminating ourselves with your, have a real, you can even reserve your rights. Then that way, and be like, we're not attorneys, we're not discussing, we're not, this is all educational purposes only, and then move from there. And then that way, I would love to have these discussions because I'm sure that you became a police officer exactly for this. Now, again, I know you got to go.
Absolutely. Take care of our people, but I got an important call that I think you just heard my phone
Yes,
ring.
yes. Thank you.
And I got to take. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.